Hello, friends, and welcome back to Hard Times and True Crimes. Today we're taking a little trip out west to a place where the sun always seems to shine, but the shadows still stretch long. We're setting our boots down in Santa Barbara, California, all the way back in the 1950s. Now back then, this town was a postcard come to life. Red-tiled rooftops, ocean breeze rolling off the Pacific, and palm trees swaying back and forth like they just don't care. Folks strolled State Street in their Sunday best. The milkman knew your name, and families gathered around black and white TVs with frozen dinners on metal trays. It was a time of pressed slacks, polished shoes, and front lawns clipped just right. But even in a picturesque place, nestled between the mountains and the sea, not everything was as picture perfect as it seems. So grab yourself a glass of sweet tea, lean back a little, and let the girls carry y'all into a story that starts with sunshine, but ends in gloom.
I'm Darlene.
And I'm Melody.
This is
Hard Times and True Crimes.
First, we want to thank Ricky Allred for buying us coffee and breakfast at
Yes.
CJ's, our favorite place to go together.
Yes. Thank you, Ricky. And you
Yes.
wrote us a great review.
Thank you.
We're fixing to hit a milestone. We are going to be releasing our 100th episode by the end of this month.
That's so hard to believe.
It's exciting.
It is.
And since we want to share our excitement with you, we are going to do a giveaway. We are going to do a gift basket that has some of our merch in it. You want to tell them what's in there?
We were going to have a t-shirt. We're going to have a Hard Times and True Crimes candle. And we are going to have a diffuser.
And those car diffusers are nice if you haven't had one.
They are awesome.
They hang from your rearview mirror and you can refresh them with the scent. And I love my diffuser.
They're really nice to have.
So if you want to know how to win one of those, the giveaway started April 11th and it was announced in our Facebook group and on our Facebook page. You can go follow us there at Hard Times and True Crimes on either of those. You can look for Hard Times and True Crimes on Instagram as well. And you can go there to find out all the details for the giveaway. But it started April 11th. You have until April 20th at midnight to get your entries in. And we will announce our winner at our 100th episode on
Yay.
April 30th.
That's exciting. Okay, so I got a crazy story for you today.
Famous last words from Darlene. They always turn out to be true.
We are going to be talking about a man named Frank Duncan, who was in his mid-20s. He was a good-looking, clean-cut defense attorney working in Santa Barbara, California. I thought that was Texas, but apparently it's California.
Oh, you thought Santa Barbara was in
Yeah.
Texas?
Geography. Not my thing. So he served his country in the Korean War, came home and got himself a law degree. He shared a modest little apartment with his mother, Elizabeth. She was older, polished, always done up just right, lipstick fresh. She wore these cool little glasses that gave her this real chic, put together look. And she didn't just love her son, Frank. She also really depended on him. In return, she would cook his meals, did his laundry, kept his appointments for him, and would sometimes even answer the phones at the office. It worked for them.
Okay.
Sometimes it worked for them. Frank and Elizabeth, they had their share of tension. Most relatives that live together do. They had this one argument one night, and it turned out to be rough. And it ended in Frank telling his mother he wanted her to move out.
Okay, so she was living with him.
Yes.
He wasn't living with her.
Right.
And
No,
he-
she lived with him.
He was the supporter. Okay.
Yes. And so whatever led up to that, don't really exactly know, but it was clear that he had hit his breaking point. But Elizabeth, she begged him, like, I don't have anywhere to go, so can I please just stay the night? He didn't say yes, didn't say no. He went to bed. Around 2:00 in the morning, he said he ended up hearing a thud, hearing a noise. And when he walked into his mother's room, he called the ambulance. He said that she had attempted suicide. Thankfully, though, Elizabeth survived.
Okay.
And at the hospital, she was questioned, and she said that the argument with Frank had just pushed her over the edge, and that basically she'd just been really distraught and overwhelmed by the fight, afraid of being alone. And she had apologized for all the trouble she caused and said that she did not want to make a scene. The police, they didn't have any choice but to take her at her word. And she was literally the sweetest looking old lady.
How old was she?
She was not that old, but you know how old how
ladies
people
back
look
then
back. It was
were the
actually in her 50s.
Yeah, like mine.
No,
is.
not younger. She was older
Okay.
than you. She was late 50s.
Quite elderly.
Yeah. So much older than me and you. While visiting his mother in the hospital, though, Frank met a beautiful nurse named Olga. Olga, I cannot pronounce her last name. It's Kupezzyk. Olga was 30 years old. She was from Canada. She was a kind, beautiful, working woman with a good reputation, and she really caught Frank's attention right off the bat. He wasn't super outgoing with the ladies. Obviously, his mother's living with him. He probably couldn't be if he wanted to be. But he could not stop thinking about this particular nurse. So he put himself out there and asked one of her nurse friends for her phone number. And she gave it to him. He didn't just call her once or twice. He kept at it. Finally, Olga agreed to go out with him. And after that, things did move pretty quickly. Within just a few months of dating, she found out she was pregnant. But he wanted to do the right thing. And in June of 1958, the two quietly married. Now, there were no big celebrations or family around, just the two of them and their little secret. But unfortunately, the newlyweds hadn't got their happy ending because after just a couple of short months, Frank was spending more and more time away from his pregnant wife than with her. He'd visit Olga every few days and maybe spend the night. And sometimes he'd go over and have dinner with her, but that was about it. It was just sad. She'd hoped for a life with her new husband. She didn't have family nearby. Her parents are still in Canada. She was trying really hard to navigate being newly married, pregnancy, because it wasn't the same back then for unwed mothers as it is today.
Right. Absolutely not.
And working as a nurse in 2 different hospitals, all on her own.
Wow.
Initially, though, she'd believed that once the dust settled, they were going to become a real family. And this little baby was going to bring them together. But instead, she's spending most nights alone in this small apartment on Garden Street, waiting for a husband who never was all the way in. And then in November of 1958, a newspaper article would read, Olga Duncan, 30 years old, of 114 Garden Street, apartment 11, was the object of a police search today. She has been missing from her home since 11 p.m. Monday, friends told police. Mrs. Duncan is the wife of Santa Barbara attorney Frank Duncan. Olga was home alone Monday night after saying goodbye to 2 of her friends who visited her at her apartment. She has not been seen since. She's employed as a surgical nurse at Cottage Hospital. However, she did not go into work yesterday and did not notify the hospital of her whereabouts. Friends said that she is expecting a baby. Anyone with information is asked to call the Santa Barbara Police Department.
That does not bode well for her.
No. There was no forced entry, no signs of struggle. A door was left open, but Olga was just gone. Her friends were the ones who called the police to file this missing persons report, not her husband, of course, because he's barely ever around. He really didn't have much to say besides that he believed she might have gone back to Canada.
Today, we always look to the husband or spouse or boyfriend
Yes.
first. But I wonder, was it like that then?
I don't know.
And the
I
fact
don't
that he
know.
was an attorney, you and I, we were sitting here going, oh, what'd he do?
Yes,
But
exactly.
I'm sure back then, you're speaking to an attorney, you're probably not maybe considering that they're a suspect.
Yeah, her purse was there. Her family in Canada had no knowledge that she was coming home for a visit. The police, they did not buy that. And plus her friends and her landlady are saying, look, she's very responsible. They knew her and she would never leave her job like that. It was her life. After a while, after about a month, they're looking for a body and they started to believe that her husband was her murderer.
Okay. So they did suspect him.
Yes,
Okay.
they did because it just didn't make sense. And when they had him come in and look around, I think some luggage was missing. And
how convenient for him, because it just backs up his claim that she went back to Canada.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So then, though, out of the clear blue sky, Frank's mother, Elizabeth Duncan, calls the police, terribly upset, terribly afraid. Her voice is shaking. And she tells authorities that she is being blackmailed. She says that a woman named Mrs. Esmeralda Esquivel is demanding money because Frank had been her husband's defense attorney. And even after paying him lots and lots of money, he still wound up having to go and spend jail time. And that was not what was supposed to happen. Elizabeth said that Mrs. Esquivel had two men, Augustine Baldonado and Louis Mayo, threaten her.
Almost like a mafia type.
Exactly. And so they told her that if she did not come up with the $6,000, they were going to throw acid in Frank's face.
Oh, gosh.
She told the police that she was warned not to tell her son about it or they were both going to die, but to get the money by any means necessary. Now, of course, that's going to be terrifying for any mother, but especially because she didn't have access to that kind of money.
It wasn't even her money. He's supporting him.
He supports her. And so she says, without my son, I don't have a way to get it. But she's terrified. And they were so forceful with her, basically told her, like, I don't care how you get the money, but you better get the money. And so Elizabeth went on to explain to the police that Frank had given her $150 to buy a typewriter for him. Like he'd given her a check. That was the first kind of bit of money that she had. And so she actually took that check and went and cashed it, gave that to the men to try and appease them, even though that's like a drop in the bucket compared to what they want. They're like, what is this? This is not what we told you. She's scared.
Yeah.
It's a wild story. And the police are intrigued because they're like, there has got to be some connection here. So now they're starting to wonder, did these people kidnap Olga? So the police told Elizabeth that they were going to help her to deliver that next payment.
Okay.
So that they could figure out like what's going on. They were going to be close by. They were going to be watching and she was going to be safe. And so she agreed. And the handoff was set to happen at the Blue Onion Cafe, this little roadside diner just outside of town. Police, they set up their surveillance, whatever that looked like back then. I don't know. Elizabeth walks in, and before long, the two men walk in. Louis Moya and Augustine Gus Baldonado. This little exchange happens. There's some words going on between the two. Then they're like, okay, we're bringing those guys in because we want to talk to them and figure out, because they knew that they're not actually the main guys.
They're like the henchmen
for this couple.
Yeah.
So they bring him into the station, start asking questions, and they both play it cool at first. They're like, okay, how do you know these people? And they're like, we do some odd jobs there. They just acted oblivious. They said that they didn't know what it was about, but that they were willing to clear things up, that kind of thing. But it did not take long before the truth did come out. And here's what Louis Moya and Gus Baldonado said happened. On the night of November 17th in 1958, just before midnight, when Olga Duncan was almost 8 months pregnant, she heard a knock on the door. She would go and answer her door. She had spent her evening playing bridge and chatting and knitting with some of her nurse friends. Olga had worked both at Cottage Hospital and St. Francis Hospital, and all of her coworkers loved and respected her. So anyway, they're there just hanging out for a little bit. I think they had some kind of cookies and they were drinking coffee and just hanging out. Friends left around 11:10 p.m. And a short while later is when she gets this knock at the door. it's Louis Moya standing there looking agitated, breathing heavy. He tells her that her husband, Frank, is downstairs, like in his car, drunk, and that he needs her help to get him out of the car. Olga hadn't seen Frank in a few days, not since he left the last time, but she was concerned, and so she puts her robe on and follows him out into the street. And in the back seat of this 1948 Chevrolet, Gus Baldonado was crouched down, pretending to be Frank.
Oh.
And when Olga leaned in, Moya hit her in the head with the butt of the gun and shoved her into the car. Baldonado, he grabs her, but Olga is not as timid as they expect her to be, and so she is screaming, fighting for her life. Even though she was stunned and bleeding, she was still going after them. So she's screaming, struggling, kicking. The two men hit her over the head over and over again so hard with this gun until she's all bloody, unconscious, and the gun breaks.
Wow.
That's hard.
Yeah.
Then they tape her hands together, and they had originally talked about taking her to Tijuana, but the car was acting up and they knew that it wasn't going to make it that far. They had paid a woman named Sarah Contreras $25 to borrow her vehicle, but it's barely running. And so instead, they decide to head south down Highway 101 into Carpinteria, and they turn off into, I have no idea, Casitas.
Oh, Casitas.
Casitas Pass Road, which is this kind of quiet, curvy stretch of road that Gus remembered because he had actually worked at this winery out there.
Okay.
So Olga starts coming to at this point when they're headed down this road. And every time she did, they would beat her again.
I'm just surprised that she was even still alive at that point.
Finally, about 7 miles into Ventura County, they pull over and they dragged her down this small embankment towards a drainage ditch. They had planned on shooting her, but they beat her so bad with the gun that it wouldn't even work.
Gosh.
So they strangle her.
Oh.
After a long while, Baldonado, he had once been like this army medic, and so he checked for her pulse, and there was no pulse. They dug a shallow grave with their bare hands because that's how far ahead they thought. They didn't even have a shovel.
Wow.
And buried her there halfway. How good can you bury someone when you're digging the hole with your hands? They bury her along with her unborn baby girl.
Oh, that is so tragic.
It is. They left her wedding ring on her taped hands. And later, the coroner would find dirt in her lungs, meaning that she was most likely still alive.
Yes, I hate that. That always gives me chills. To me,
It's
that
terrible.
would be the worst, the scariest, most horrific way to go.
I hope she didn't know. I hope she was unconscious
Yeah,
and like just didn't know.
I know. So it's unfortunate they couldn't have just shot her and gotten it over with. But what a horrible way to be tortured, really.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Awful.
Back in Santa Barbara, the men go back and they told the woman, because they had borrowed this car.
Oh, yeah.
So they literally rip out her upholstery and they told her that they had to take it out because they had burned a hole in the seat with a cigarette. They had been promised $6,000 for Olga's murder by Elizabeth Duncan, Frank's mother.
So there was no other couple, that couple she made up? Okay, I did not see that coming.
So she had promised them $6,000. They are coming to her wanting their money.
Yeah.
But she told him that she couldn't pull any money out of the bank because the police were already asking questions at this point about Olga's disappearance.
Right.
So instead, she stole that check from Frank that he'd given her for that typewriter and cashed it in. Elizabeth Ann Duncan wasn't the name she was born with. She was actually born Hazel Lucille Sinclair Nye. She was born on April 16th in 1904 in Kansas City, Missouri. I don't have a whole lot of information about her early life, but it seems like she had come from a decent enough family. I know that her dad's dad had been a preacher, And her mother, Inez Branch, went on to open up and operate a nursing home in the 1930s. Elizabeth was one of 5 children, but she didn't stay at home long because by 1918, at just 14 years old, she was already married to a man named Dewey Adolphe Tessier. The two of them had 2 daughters together, but she wouldn't stay married to him for very long. Matter of fact, she wouldn't stay married to anybody for long. She ended up getting married somewhere between 11 and 12 times.
What?
Sometimes she didn't even bother to divorce the
That's
one
nuts.
before. Yeah. It's hard to even really keep count because, it was
She
crazy.
probably didn't even know how many times.
She was a con artist. She would marry these men, bleed them dry, and when the money was dried up, she moved on. Sometimes she'd even collect alimony. Now, when she married a man named Frank Duncan, and that's not to be confused with Frank's father.
Oh,
Frank Jr.
But not his dad?
Not his dad.
She married another Frank?
Yes. The man before him was also named Frank. Weird, but true.
This is getting weirder by the minute.
Yes.
What are the chances that you marry 2 Frank Duncans in a row?
Not Frank Duncan. He actually, I guess, her second husband, Frank Duncan, adopted him.
Oh.
But his biological dad's name was Frank as well.
Okay.
Yeah. Elizabeth and Frank Duncan had a daughter together named Patsy. Okay, but did I say already that she left her other 2 daughters?
Well, you said that she had 2 daughters with that first guy, and I was wondering, where are these girls?
She left them with their father, and basically they went on to live wonderful lives. The oldest daughter ended up being a nurse.
Okay.
Her first husband remarried, and that would be their mother.
So she did them a favor, really much.
She did them
pretty
a favor for sure. Now, Frank Jr., and then she also had this younger daughter named Patsy Ann. Frank Jr. was a hardworking kid. He was very smart. He kept his grades up. He was responsible. He worked hard, always had jobs. He was a focused kid. And somehow even managed to, in the middle of all his mama's chaos, put himself through law school.
Yeah, I think I've misjudged him because we always suspect the spouse.
Yeah.
And it sounded very much like that. Wow.
And that lets you know, though, however you spin a story.
Exactly.
To be fair, by most accounts, though, Elizabeth was always a really good mother to Frank. In fact, she later admitted in court that he was her favorite. No surprise there. She was pretty good to Patsy, too. But tragedy would strike in 1948. The family had gone on a little vacation, and out of nowhere, Patsy, who'd been in perfect health, suffered a cerebral hemorrhage and died at 15 years old. That loss really shattered Elizabeth. She had what was described as just a full-on nervous breakdown. At that time, Frank Jr. was working and putting himself through law school. And Elizabeth, deep in her grief, leaves her husband and goes and moves in with her son.
Okay. Yeah.
They end up getting a divorce.
And this was probably husband number, we don't know.
Oh, yeah. Several in.
Yeah.
She told him that he needed her because she said she was going to help him stay on top of things. She was going to cook for him. She was going to clean. She was going to wash his clothes. And she framed it like she was sacrificing for him.
Yeah, because she's a con artist. I mean,
Right.
that's her conning ways.
Exactly. She was manipulating him and making him believe this is all out of love, a mother's love. And Frank felt bad for her. His little sister had just died. She was going through that divorce, and he worried about her.
Yeah.
And that's how, this long tangled bond between mother and son. And I do believe he was trying to do the right thing. So when Frank finished law school, he and his mama moved to an apartment together in Santa Barbara, and he became a criminal defense attorney. He was a pretty good one. And Elizabeth was a proud mama. In fact, she would go watch her boy in court and stand up and clap.
I can imagine the judge seeing that.
Oh, my gosh.
You are a very proud mom, but please keep that out of my courtroom.
Yes. And her boy was a lawyer now, and he was making money. And in her mind, that meant she had made it too. And so she was figuring that he was going to take care of her for the rest of her life and give her the things that she'd never had. She just had this really big entitlement mentality. Like, Frank owed her something. She gave him life, and now he was to give her his life. And Frank, as much as he loved his mom, he would eventually just get tired of it. It was a lot. And he wanted to date. He liked women. I feel like he was a responsible spender. He found out she had bought like a beauty shop or something. She had no money.
So it must have been his money she used for it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And she would lie about it. She butted into every part of his life. And any woman that Frank showed interest in was a negative. So Elizabeth, she was just super controlling, and always, like, on one hand, she was really controlling, but on the other hand, she was really good at manipulating him and making him feel sorry for her.
Yeah.
Because it was his mother. It's your old mother.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Frank just realized, I cannot live a normal life with her always in the middle of it.
No.
And so eventually that night, when he had found out that she had purchased this whole beauty shop without his knowledge, they had one of their worst arguments yet. And he told her, look, I cannot take this anymore. You have got to go. I want you out of my apartment. And Elizabeth begged him, please, let me stay one more night. And so he was like, whatever. Like, he just went to bed. But for her, that moment felt like her whole world was slipping away, because it was said, too, that one of her biggest fears was being alone.
Yeah, I would think, too, that all those marriages, I know they were manipulative and cons, but
yeah,
that's got to be a part of it.
And so now she feels like that is coming true. And so she took a handful of her prescription phenobarbital.
Okay. She really did try to overdose.
She did.
Okay. I was thinking that was more of
Maybe
a manipulative ploy. Okay.
Yeah, it was. And she slipped into a coma, and she was actually in a coma for weeks. So she didn't just wake back up. Like, it was serious.
Okay.
And Frank, he feels guilty.
Yeah, I'm sure he does, but poor guy.
And he stayed by her side nearly the whole time in the hospital room, wondering, did I push her too far? You got to feel bad for him.
Oh, I do feel bad for him.
And during those long, quiet days, though, there was this particular nurse who made things a little easier. And she was actually there taking care of his mother. She was wonderful. She was kind and calm and beautiful. Everything his mother wasn't.
Right.
And before long, his time at the hospital wasn't just about worrying about her. It was about Olga. And so that's when he had asked for her phone number. And like I said, at first, Olga wasn't really sure about him. He was kind of quiet and soft-spoken. And she could tell, even with the relationship with this mother in a coma, that there was baggage.
Oh, yeah. She probably spotted it a mile away, where Frank realizes it's not healthy, but doesn't probably realize the extent to that it's not.
Yeah, and he probably feels trapped. And she probably thinks, oh, I'll fix this.
Yeah.
Because I would be thinking that.
She never had a chance. Frank and Olga really never had a chance as long as the mama was involved.
And probably her being in that coma was the most peace he had.
Probably.
And yeah. But eventually, after enough calls, she agreed to go out with him, and they started seeing each other. He really was smitten with her. He fell in love with her, and she him. Once Elizabeth woke up from that coma, Frank introduces her, and immediately she hated her. And it wasn't because she's rude or disrespectful. It was just because she could sense how much Frank loved her and how serious he was about her.
Yeah.
How sick is that?
It was crazy.
Most mothers, that's what you want for your child. But she was not interested in being second in her son's life. And the closer Frank got to Olga, the more determined Elizabeth became to tear them apart. She would call her a foreigner. She said that there's no way she's going to let Frank keep seeing her. She cried. She begged. She would make up lies about her and tell Frank. She told anyone who would listen that she wanted to push Olga down the stairs. She called her a nasty immigrant. Like, how could my son take up with this nasty immigrant?
Piece of work.
Making up stories, saying just horrific stuff to everybody, to Frank. She just hated her for no other reason than because she was afraid that she was going to take her son from her. But Frank was in love.
Yeah.
And no matter how bad things got with his mom, he kept seeing Olga. And then Olga got pregnant. And when Elizabeth finds out, she snapped.
Yeah.
She told everybody that baby is not Frank's, that Olga was trying to trap him, that this is just a scheme to get his money. But Frank stood up to her. She's having my baby and we are going to get married. I don't know exactly what Elizabeth said to him that night, but she had convinced him to promise her that she would not marry Olga.
She got him to promise that?
Yes. So he was like, okay, I won't marry her.
I bet he was just saying that to get her off his case. He still intended to marry her. He was just looking for a way, like, how am I going to get away
out
from
of
her?
this?
Yeah.
Exactly. Then Elizabeth spent the rest of the night calling Olga over and over, harassing her, threatening her, telling her, Frank is in love with another woman. He's not in love with you. I know what you're doing. But Frank, he showed up at Olga's door and told her, I'm so sorry that this happened. I still love you and I still want to marry you if you'll have me. The two of them went down to the Santa Barbara courthouse and they got married.
Oh, they did get married.
Yes. But Frank asked for one thing. He asked them at the courthouse not to publish it just yet because he said that he needed time to tell his mother and to let her get used to the idea. But the next morning, Elizabeth woke up and Frank wasn't home. She knew something was up, so she calls one of the hospitals where Olga is working and asks to speak with her. And they told her, oh, she's off today. She's getting married. And you can just imagine how Elizabeth took that news. So when she found out that they had gotten married, she just lost it. So Frank moves out and he moves in with Olga. But Elizabeth shows up. She threatens Olga. She cusses her out. She cusses Frank out. And then she'd switch. She'd cry. She'd beg. She'd tell Frank how much she loved him, how she was getting older and she needed him. She was just going to kill herself. He was all she had. She has no reason to live without him. And from the outside, it's easy to see it was manipulation. But when you have been raised by someone like that, the lines get blurry.
Yeah.
Even when your gut's telling you something's wrong, you don't know how to always get out of situations. And so Frank, he even moved Olga to a different apartment because his mother was harassing her so much. And he's trying to create space and keep the peace. But Elizabeth always found out. And she would show up, banging on her door, screaming, calling her horrible names, accusing her of the wildest, craziest stuff. And eventually Frank just gave in and he told Olga, I'm going to move back in with my mom just temporarily because she's scared. She's really a good person. She's a great mother. I just know that once the baby comes, everything's going to calm down and she's going to love the baby. And this is going to bring everybody together. And I think he believed that.
I bet he did, but it's just so sad for Olga because I'm sure she knew differently, but she didn't have a clue that the lady was going to crazy enough to do what she did. And it's just, wow.
It's horrible.
It's a crazy dynamic there.
Yeah. Frank goes back home and he lives with his mother, but he still goes to Olga's a few nights a week and like they have dinner together and sometimes he'll stay the night. He just was a coward.
Yeah. And he's trying to make peace between the two, but that's never going to happen.
He would later say he was just trying to keep them both happy. And trying to get through the storm until the baby was born.
Yeah.
He really believed that was going to sort it all out. In the meantime, Elizabeth is not letting up. She is begging Frank to get an annulment. And Frank's, no, she's my wife. She's having my baby. Stop. Sheesh. What does Elizabeth do? She comes up with a plan. She calls the Santa Barbara Salvation Army and tells them that she wants to hire a young guy for an odd job. It's a young guy and a young woman. And she's, okay, this is what I need you to do. I need you to come with me down to the courthouse in Ventura and pretend to be my son, Frank. And tells this girl, I need you to pretend to be Olga.
What are you telling me right now?
Yes.
No, she did not.
She hired these strangers off the street to impersonate her son and his wife. Yeah, they didn't ask, I guess back then you didn't have to have ID like you do today. Basically, she had this woman go down there and say, I lied. This is not his baby. They signed the affidavit, handed it in, and just like that, gives him the annulment.
That you can't make this stuff up.
No. Frank found out about it. And he's, Mom, you're nuts. This is insane. He's, first of all, this doesn't even mean anything. We're married. This isn't actually legal. Stop. And I don't know how he could always continually believe the best about her, because she did crazy crap that he did find out about.
Yeah, that should have been it right there, though.
Yeah. Oh, that's not the worst. It gets worse.
Oh, gosh.
But of course, we know she doesn't let up. So the crazy lady even takes the annulment papers to Olga's landlady and showed her, and look, they're living in sin. You need to kick her out.
Oh, my gosh.
Yes. She somehow talks the mortified landlady. I feel like this lady was just a pushover. She didn't know, what do I do with this crazy lady? Talks her into letting her in to Olga's apartment. Now, Olga wasn't there.
Yeah.
But she starts going into the closets, like tearing stuff out. Olga said that she would rip up pictures, even Frank's baby pictures, because she was mad at him too. She told the landlord she was going to kill them both.
So she told him.
Yeah, she told the landlord she was going to kill Frank and Olga. The landlady later testified that she said, nobody is going to take away my son. I'm going to kill her if it is the last thing I do. She said she just couldn't understand it because Olga was just the sweetest girl.
Yeah.
Olga had wrote her family back home after this. And this is what she wrote. She said, as you have all guessed now, this kind of gives you like a little glimpse into who she was. As you've all guessed now, all is not well with Frank and me, or should I say, Frank and me and his mother. As I told you before, she has lived with Frank for so long that she has an uncanny hold on him. She is a very possessive woman and has not allowed him out of her sight. Therefore, Frank hasn't really grown up. He's never been away from home. We had been planning to marry for some time, but Frank didn't tell his mother until shortly before. She phoned me at 2 a.m. in the morning telling me that she didn't approve and that he was in love with another girl and that I was a foreigner. And so the next day, Frank found out about it and said that if I would still have him, we would be married that very day. After weeping all night, you can imagine how I felt. All of this was a shock at first, but I rather laugh now. I could go on, but all I can say is that she has not allowed Frank to live here. He has a great problem. I've consulted many people. Thank God, though, that I found out about this stuff now rather than a year from now. I know you will want to help. You can do something. Write and tell me news about home and the children. That will cheer me up more than anything else. If there's anything else to say about the situation, I will write you. I didn't write about it sooner because I thought the time would work it out, but now I know it won't. I don't want to dwell on my troubles. Life is short, and I want to enjoy the rest of mine.
Wow.
How sad.
Very sad. The poor woman. I just hate that he wasn't strong enough to stand up to his mama. There is a reason the Bible says a man's supposed to leave his family and cleave to his wife,
Yes.
and they become one.
Right.
Yeah.
And then in the middle of this November, Olga disappears. And she'd had a couple of nurse friends over at her apartment the night before, hanging out. Those were the last people to see her again when they left at around 11 p.m. But Olga, she was this surgical nurse, and her absence is going to be noticed, of course, and she's sure not going to miss surgery. And that's when her two friends went over to her apartment to check on her. And when they got there, they met up with Miss Barnett, the landlady, and the front door had been partially opened. They walked inside, the lights are on. But there were dishes from like the night before. The bed hadn't been slept in. It was just all very weird. And they call Frank. He was in court that day, but as soon as he got finished, he came over. He really did believe. He was like, she's mad. And I don't think he thought she was gone to stay. He thought maybe she had gone to visit her family or just gone somewhere for a couple of days.
Sure. That does make sense now. Like,
Sure.
I can see why he would think that.
Absolutely. But then, though, they realized that her purse was still there. Everybody else thought he might have been the one to do it, or the police did, until they started talking to people who told them about Elizabeth and how she hated Olga and how she had taunted her and threatened her and showed up her apartment and caused scenes. So for about a month, the investigators are really like trying to piece things together. But you got to think, Elizabeth, she's the mother of a respected criminal defense attorney. And it took them a minute. But then things started to unravel because remember those two killers, Moya and Baldonado, had been promised that 600 that they wanted. So here's what happened.
600 or 6,000?
6,000.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, 6,000. When Frank had given her that 150 for the typewriter, she kept 50 for herself and gave the murderers $100. Frank knew his mama, and so when she got home, he asked for the receipt for the typewriter, and she didn't have one, and he was mad. And that's when she flipped the script and was like making herself to be the victim, and she told him that wild story about being blackmailed. And she was a pathological liar, and she could make up stuff on the fly. And he was like, then I'm going to the Tropical Hotel and get my money back. I want that typewriter.
Yeah.
And I got her husband a good deal. And she was like, no. She starts crying. You can't do that. They'll kill you. They'll throw acid in your face and all this stuff. And then we're going to the cops.
Yeah.
You're going to tell them what happened.
He actually still is believing that story.
Yes. Yeah. That was the beginning of the end for Elizabeth. Because once the police got involved and this whole twisted story just starts coming apart, as investigators keep digging, they find out that this wasn't even the first time that Elizabeth had tried to have Olga murdered.
Oh, gosh.
Nope. She had been plotting for quite a while.
Good night.
One of her earlier plans involved this young woman who worked as a car hop at a drive-in diner that Elizabeth and her little friend, she was just this 80-year-old woman, Mrs. Short, and they would go and eat there all the time. So Elizabeth really liked this particular waitress, and she trusted her enough to vent to her. She told her that Olga was blackmailing her son, that she was swindling him out of money. Then one day, Elizabeth pulls her to the side and says, hey, I'll pay you if you come with me. We're going to sneak up on Olga, throw a chloroformed blanket over her head, drag her to the car, drive her up to the mountains, and throw her off of a cliff. The young woman declined, thankfully.
But did she report it?
She told Frank.
Okay.
She called him and was like, I think your mom's going nuts. So he goes straight to Elizabeth and is like, what the heck is going on? Did you say this? And she's, oh my gosh, no. She misunderstood what I was saying. She said, I did joke around about kidnapping you, like to take you to LA to just get you away from all this drama.
Man, I'm getting a little mad at Frank, though.
Me too. I'm like, you're an idiot.
You are an idiot. And I'm sorry, but it's time to get out from underneath Mama's wing. And if you can't see that for what it is, you're choosing to be dumb.
Yes.
Like at some point, you need to grow a pair and put your
big boy pants on and
look out for your wife.
But instead, he's, Mom, stop this crazy talk. My gosh. That's all it was to him. He did think, I wish she'd shut her mouth. Like he knew she was over the top, but it was just nonsense to him. But think about it, the annulment and then this.
Yeah, that's more than just throwing a few accusations around. That's crazy.
Another plan involved her best friend, the sweet little 80-year-old woman.
Wait, there was another one?
Oh, yeah. Now listen, this was a weird relationship she's friends with this 80-year-old woman. Mrs. Short was elder, but Elizabeth was clearly like the one in charge. She was the dominant one, the manipulator.
Yeah.
So Elizabeth tells Mrs. Short to invite Olga over to her apartment. And once she got there, she was going to see her like in front of a closet. And then Elizabeth was going to be hiding in that closet. When the moment was right, she was going to jump out and wrap something around Olga's neck and strangle her to death. Then they were going to hang her body in the closet and make it look like she had taken her own life.
Unbelievable.
And Mrs. Short was like, no, like not in my closet. What are you talking? No, we're not doing that.
Thankfully, she didn't go along with it, but I bet she didn't report it.
Oh, no, she didn't. Later, when it was too late, she was like, Frank's not even with her anymore. He's home. Like, why
Yeah.
are you doing this
I
or
just don't
whatever?
understand, though. If somebody came to you with that kind of a plan,
Oh, I'm
wouldn't
calling.
you think, okay, this is beyond normal behavior. I need to call and report this.
Yes. But Elizabeth wasn't about to give up.
No, she obviously wasn't.
So finally, she walks into the Tropical Cafe, the one that is owned by Mrs. Escabel, whose husband had been one of Frank's former clients. And just like she'd done with everybody else, she starts in on her stories about how horrible Olga is, stealing from Frank, blackmailing him, using him, dragging him down. And she finally just asked, do you know anybody that could take care of my problem? And Mrs. Escabel said, I know two that might.
So she just got a hold of the
Right.
right person.
And that's how Louis Moya and Gus Baldonado came into the picture. And we've already talked about how the police eventually got the truth out of those two in the full confession and how they led detectives to Olga's grave. But I don't know if I mentioned that when Baldonado agreed to show police where she was buried, he was like, I'm going to show you, but I have two conditions. I want to speak to a priest and I don't want to see her body when you dig her up. And he also swore and never changed his story. And he was really honest. They told it all. They did not do anything to make themselves look good. He told the absolute truth. That's why I've always believed everything they said. But he did say you could tell they felt the worst about her being pregnant. They were like, we did not know she was pregnant. We would have never gone through with that. But still, you're terrible that you could do that to a woman.
Yeah.
And so finally, Elizabeth Duncan is arrested and she's charged with Olga's murder. And at first, Frank stays away. He actually skipped town. Like, he left. He was so mad. He was angry. But then Elizabeth has him right back, wrapped around her finger. She swore to him that she did not do it. She was being blackmailed. And that Olga had been murdered as revenge for that case that Frank had handled.
If you tell me he believes her, I'm going to be so mad.
And whether it's denial or that old emotional grip that she had always had on him, he told reporters that she just wasn't capable of something like that she was the best mother a boy could have ever had. So the trial, of course, is just full-blown chaos. She comes in, she's a nut. When the jury's there, she's on her best behavior.
Sure, she is.
When the jury's not there, she is cussing. She comes in holding hands with Frank. Sometimes it's just weird. But yeah, anyway, everybody's trying to come in, trying to get a glimpse of her. And Elizabeth and Frank, they're side by side. He's actually advising her attorney. They're, like I said, seen holding hands in court. At one point, there's even a photo snapped of her kissing him on the cheek. And people are weirded out.
Yeah, they should be.
And they're like, there's no evidence that anything incestual ever happened. But there was just something really off about the way she clung to him and the way she looked at him, the way she couldn't stand the thought of him loving anyone else. It just went way beyond a protective mother and son relationship.
Yeah, it sounds like a Norman Bates situation.
It's what it is. It's predatory grooming behavior. You think about it. She has groomed him his whole life. And folks sitting in the courtroom, it was just weird.
And poor Olga.
And Frank, he's defending his mother, still testifying. She's innocent. I love my wife, but I know my mother couldn't do that to me, could not have done that to her. Elizabeth was like, yeah, I didn't like her, but a lot of mothers don't like their sons' wives. I didn't want him to be with her. I was afraid of being alone. He was my favorite son. I was too possessive, but I did not have her murdered. But the rest of the world could clearly see what was going on. And there was the threats, the fake annulment, the confessions from literally everybody.
Yeah.
The dead pregnant wife in a shallow grave. And she's connected to both of these men. So in 1960, Elizabeth was found guilty of first-degree murder.
Thank God for that.
After she was convicted, Elizabeth was sentenced to death. And she became one of the last women in California to ever face the gas chamber. She was sent to San Quentin, where she sat on death row. separated from the men in this small cell all by herself. But Elizabeth wasn't broken, not even close. She wrote letters constantly to Frank, to the press, to anybody who would listen, begging for help, pleading her innocence, claiming that she was the victim, still saying that she was being blackmailed and set up. She painted herself as this poor, misunderstood, aging mother, saying that all she ever wanted was to protect her son. She even tried to get clemency and had Frank appealing felon appeals left and right. And every time she got in front of a reporter or had a chance to speak publicly, it was like, I didn't do it. I was a good mother. I would never do that. Frank, he keeps visiting her, still the loyal son. And even with all the truth out there, he just could not let go. But on August 8th, 1962, just after midnight, Elizabeth was led into the gas chamber at San Quentin. In her final hour, she was 58 years old, by the way, when that happened. Frank is there, like fighting still for her to get this last minute pardon from the governor. He tried everything he could to save her. And I think they were both just shocked that it wasn't happening. And as they're leading her to the gas chamber, Frank walks out into the streets, like he walks out of the prison, like into the streets. And he just looks lost and he's saying, they won't listen to me. She's innocent. My mother is innocent. And he just couldn't bring himself to see it. She had not confessed. She hadn't apologized, had never said she was sorry. She just sat down, and a few minutes later, she was gone. She had become the third woman ever executed by the state of California and the last woman to die in the gas chamber there. As for the two men who carried out the murder, Louis Moya and Augustine Gus Baldonado, the ones who had beat and strangled Olga and did all those terrible things to her, they did not escape justice either. They were both also convicted of first-degree murder and were both sentenced to death, and just like Elizabeth, were sent to San Quentin. And on December 7th in 1961, just before Elizabeth herself was executed, they were also put into the gas chamber side by side.
Okay.
Died at the same time. And Frank Duncan, he lived. He's still alive as far as I know. I know he was in 2021 in his 90s.
Wow.
But because of his cowardice
Yeah.
and his refusal to draw lines in the sand with his mother, he lost both of the women that he loved, the wife that he loved, and Elizabeth, the mother, he could never quite untangle himself from. But he couldn't protect one, couldn't save the other. After the trial and execution, Frank left Santa Barbara. He got married eventually, but everybody said he was never quite the same. He refused later to do interviews about the case, and he would just say, I'm not going to talk about that. That happened a long time ago. Frank did continue to practice law for decades. In the end, 5 lives were lost.
Yeah.
Olga, her baby, and eventually Elizabeth, Moya, and Baldonado. And what we see is this woman consumed with jealousy, justifying evil with emotion, and destroying lives under the illusion of love. And in the end, it all leads to death. And it's just like the scripture in the book of Proverbs. There's a way that seems right to a man, but in the end, it leads to death.
Yep. Wow. That story was beyond crazy. The moral of this story is, first of all, men, leave and cleave.
Mamas, cut the apron strings.
Yes. And if you have a mother-in-law that's just a little bit unhinged, I guess maybe be grateful she wasn't like Elizabeth. Because,
Yes.
my gosh, that's just crazy.
Isn't it the saddest thing? And the sad thing is, it sounds like she would have forgiven her at any turn.
Yes. She really did seem like a sweet person. Literally just fell for the wrong person and ended up in the wrong family. And anything less than the death penalty for Elizabeth would have not been justice. I'm so glad that she got that.
Me too.
I did feel sorry for Frank for a minute. And later I'm just like, no.
Sad that he was brought up that way. But at some point, we have got to make decisions.
He's an attorney, for goodness sake. So be careful what family you marry into. That's all I have to say about that.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Thanks for spending time with us today. And so if you enjoyed the story, we'd be so grateful if you would leave us a rating or review so we can keep telling these stories. Those were
Some hard times.
Yes, they were.
Now, I believe when a woman becomes a mother-in-law, she just goes through certain changes that she can't help. Kind of like menopause, but much worse. And once you accept the fact that she just can't help it, it'll be so much easier to forgive her. So when you see her this Easter, you make sure you let her know you forgive her. And it'll make this Easter one that won't soon be forgotten. You can sit down together and enjoy all the episodes of Hard Times and True Crimes. And you can think, if she don't straighten up, that's what I'll do to her. And I'm sure she'll be thinking, if I weren't so good to them, that's probably what they would do to me. So you make sure you tell everybody you know, even your mother-in-law, to check out Hard Times and True Crimes. Till next time, goodbye.